All right, welcome to episode 125 of Shunya One. And today we have two special guests who are both founders and building a very interesting company. It's actually been a while, Amit, that we've had two guests on the show
Yeah, I know we normally
here.
are, we're just getting one, but we have a co-founding team, so it's interesting and really great business, right? I mean, like what they're
Yeah,
doing is really, really interesting. I think that it really does set the way forward for like a lot of people who are looking at the e-commerce space and what they want to do over there. So very interesting what they're
yep,
doing there.
yep. Welcome to the show, Vinita and Kaushik. Thanks so much for making the time, guys. Great to have you. How's it going?
Thank
Doing
you.
well,
We're very
thanks.
excited too, big fans of this podcast. So finally getting a chance to be here
Oh wow, that is rare to know that we have two founders who have actually time to listen to podcasts also.
while running, of course.
Yes, while running, and that's also another passion. I know we briefly spoke about that. You guys have you've had yourselves. So I want to know. I mean, either of you, if you could give me the your personal backstories a little bit into into what happened and how you got together to sort of build Sugar. But and whether it was pre-running, post-running. Vinita, you mentioned that you were been running for ages. Uh, Kaushik, what about
So
yourself? Did you
I'm
catch
I'm a
up
very
with her?
reluctant runner. So
Okay.
we'll get into the backstory of how eventually I realized that okay, I need to spend more time. We need to spend more time together. So there is no option. Get off the couch, put on your shoes, and start running. I did not factor in that I won't be able to catch up. Then I realized that very late. So then I
Yes.
just went back to the couch.
Love, lovely. But just to hear, what could you tell us a little bit more, Vinita?
Yeah. So, I'm an engineer. Growing up, I was like, okay, always like academically very focused, and had that dream that okay, going to IIT and IIM, etc. And then, so went to IIT Madras directly. Went to IIM Ahmedabad after that. Did an internship in investment banking at Deutsche Bank. 1 month in London, 1 month in New York, and at that time, I really started realizing that I this is not what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I really had that, I started reading about founders and companies that had been founded, and I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but in the next 10 years we'll figure out as and when things work out, and maybe I'll take up this banking job and then start up later. But then while I was graduating from IIM Ahmedabad, I met a couple of other batchmates, and then we started thinking about what if we do it right away. And then at 23, while graduating from IIM Ahmedabad, we decided to give up like our plush investment banking job offers and started up. So our original plan was to launch like a women's lingerie business in India, primarily online. And we went to like 7, 8 VC pitches, including the big names, and they were like, you're fresh out of college, how are you going to build a brand in India? And obviously it's not going to be very fundable. And that didn't happen, so we went to the exact opposite extreme, like like really spurned lovers, and we decided that okay, we're never going to raise money, we're only going to bootstrap and build a company with our own money revenue. And did that for about 5 years with a couple of other batchmates. So this is back in 2007,
Oh,
and 2007 to 12, tried running a company which was bootstrapped. It was an HR outsourcing company. It was very hard, didn't really scale, but we were profitable. We were able to like draw our own salaries, but there was really not much action happening. And Kaushik was one batch junior to me at IIM Ahmedabad, and we were seeing each other. And in 2011, we actually got married. So once, and so in 2012, both of us started talking about doing something together. And for me, I had completed 5 years in this company, which I thought wasn't really going anywhere. We wouldn't be able to really scale this because it wasn't really a product; it was a service. So, running a service business is very hard, especially
yeah.
B2B. It's all about like just constantly sales, sales, sales. And That's when we came upon this idea, which we'll talk about, which wasn't sugar actually, it was something else. But yeah, then Kaushik and I decided to launch this in 2012 together. Let Kaushik talk about his background, and then we can talk about what we started building and how it ended up being resulting in sugar.
Most people, give me very weird looks, and I tell them, there is a footnote to the fact that she's a batch senior to me in business school. I worked for 2 years before going to business school. She went directly. I mean,
Nobody's
that's just
judging,
how-
Kaushik.
yeah, you don't get the stairs. I get the stairs. but anyway, I mean, for me, born and brought up in Calcutta, you know, standard, very predictable career path. Went to Pilani for engineering. Moved to Hyderabad, Oracle, worked there for 2 years, and then suddenly I realized that I was male engineer, techie, applying, wondering what to do with the career, and
You had some check boxes left to.
yeah, I ran out. I was like, when I applied for the business school forms, I'm like, yeah, it's as undifferentiated as possible. So I remember going to the group discussions and personal interviews after clearing the test, and I'm like, how do I stand out? There are 9 other people just like me on this panel, and I remember interview me. I used to say that I want to someday start a company of my own. I don't think I fully believed it back then. I think I mean, I can today admit that I probably said that a bit to stand out. But anyway, B school happened. And now in IMA, their batch, 4 or 5 of them left. It's a rat race, right? You feel that to compete, you either compete with grades, which was not an option for me. My grades were terrible. Or you compete by getting some of the more sought after jobs and internships. So that worked erratically though, and an investment banking job happened. But then their batch, when we saw people actually giving that up to say, okay, there's still some time, let's try building something. A lot of us in our batch got inspired. And we said, okay, we didn't really stop to think that, okay, or ask them how tough it was. We just said, okay, let's also do the same. So a batchmate of mine started up back in 2008, which was 1 year after she passed out. But the first 2 years we did a lot of different things. We tried an online insurance company, an online bargaining portal. Nothing really scaled, although we raised some seed capital from Rediff at that time. And this is 2009. But it didn't scale. And 2010, that was a year before, we got married. We were in a very weird position because the families were being introduced. There's this question that, ladka kya karta hai? What does the guy do? And I swear I didn't have a legit answer to that. So, and of course, my bank balance is looking ridiculous. So, called it quits then, went back to a job, worked with McKinsey for 2 years. And 2012, sort of the paths, came together. We just said that, okay, we finished, we're done with the marriage. There is hopefully some time before our family start asking the next question. There is time now. Let's try starting up one more time. But of course, as Vinita said, it was not sugar that we started with, and it is something related, but very, very different. So, but that's where.
Yeah, this is an incredible backstory, and thank you for going into this much detail, guys, because the honest truth is, I mean, some parts of it I personally find relatable. Definitely the ladka kya karta hai part. But this is also inspiring because both of you sort of, dove into your entrepreneurial stints at different times. I mean, you arrived at the choice of, wanting to do something on your own independently. Before you all obviously dove into this together. And Vinita, you mentioned that, like, your earlier business was a services business. I think back then that's what starting up was. Most companies were doing sort of offshoring or services, or like there were hardly any product companies out there. But what I want to know, like you said, you've built something next, which is the maybe the genesis of Sugar. But did you all, like, given your, I would say, like you said, Kaushik, not fairly undifferentiated backgrounds, why choose, like, how did you narrow down on an industry? Because I heard HR, I heard the original lingerie brand idea. I heard so many ideas amongst the two of you. How did you know what to sort of do? Or was it like a pure data-driven decision, or was it half data, half passion, or in your own words, maybe, as either of you?
So honestly, I think so 2012, once I exited my previous company, sold my shares to my co-founder and had like some bit of small amount of seed capital. And Kaushik was still working at McKinsey. In fact, he was at Jamshedpur in a steel plant, and at that time, it actually started with him just saying that, whatever you need, I'll help you out. And I thought that probably I'm going to start by myself, Kaushik would probably moonlight and help out with stuff because he was the tech guy. So in terms of like, over that year, we sort of started having this realization that we're probably a great team, because like the things that we get excited about are very different. And, like, for instance, I've always been like a more numbers execution kind of a person. Kaushik likes, the more creative stuff, and he likes tech. So Kaushik was always very passionate about saying that, is there something that can leverage e-commerce over the next 10 years to build something? And I was always obsessed with this idea of, women consumers, and, like the idea of bringing like the best of brands and products to women in India, and doing it like execution being the differentiator. Like there were companies trying to do that, but could you do it better? Because we were still not able to get access to the kind of brands and products that, women in Europe and the US had. So for me, it was always about like, can we build a brand? Can we build a consumer business which especially targets women? Because that's where we were seeing the maximum change. Millennial women were really changing the way they were shopping, the way they were, fashion, makeup, all of these were going through a massive transition around then, 2012, 2013. So at that time, we were thinking about what could like really leverage both, but mostly I was like figuring out, what industries would be interesting. And, women consumer was, I don't know why, it was always something, and that's how lingerie had started. And so one of the ideas that at that time was really taking off in the US was subscription commerce. And fundamentally, the logic that we used was that, beauty as a category works really well for subscription, because, if you're able to curate these monthly boxes with sample size products, it will lead to women upgrading to the full size product and, purchasing and getting exposure through these brands. And 2012 was the time when a lot of international brands were beginning to see a slowdown in Europe and the US of the markets. And they were seeing India as the only economy which was growing, like only market for beauty, which was growing like 10-15% year on year. And so, at that time, the idea that we finalized, and it was actually a very, sort of starting with what are the spaces that excite us? Are there any overlaps? And then, what would be, as a founder, when you start a business, you're very naive and you want to do something which is different. Like the only lens that you use is nobody else should be doing that. Right. Yeah. And, now what we do, we always say that, like, it's like everybody thinks it's the stupidest idea to create a business, which is like where P&G and L'Oreal and Unilever are already killing it, and then try to say that I will create a product which is exactly the, same category with a small, like it's just better. But, that's not a differentiated business. But at that time, we were very clear that we want to create something unique. And so we put our like minds to thinking about like how good our algorithm will be to figure out like every single woman comes on our platform, gives us like a few details about her beauty profile, like what is her skin type like, what is her skin tone like, what kind of colors she likes wearing, and we will use our algorithm to actually match the best products from the world and make them available to her at a 500 rupee per month. Now, in 2012, it seemed like the coolest idea, and the idea that sort of worked for both of our passions. Like, for me, because the TG was right, and for Kaushik because it was like tech and e-commerce. And yeah, so that's when we launched FabBag back in 2012. And when it like the first few months, like momentum started building, and I just tried to raise some funding. Like the first few angels were like, it would be a lot easier for you to raise this money if Kaushik were to also do this full time. I think the bias against like women entrepreneurs was much higher back then. Things have really evolved in the last 8-9 years, and I literally like called him up and said, listen, can you just join full time? It'll make it easier to raise money, and our like we don't have to worry.
It did not make it easier.
Stuff.
That was a wild goose chase though, but yeah.
And yeah, so and that's when he quit McKinsey and came on board full time, and we also raised like a small seed round, and yeah, that's how it happened.
So the story you just told us was about subscription commerce at a time when e-commerce itself was just starting. There were definitely not too many other subscription products out there. I mean, I don't even remember even the men's hygiene ones coming much later, and like there was very few things which were subscription. So why, how did that go, by the way? I know what you are today, and of course, how did that piece of Fatbag go, or how did it do, and did that inform your decision to sort of double down on what Sugar is today?
So I'll maybe take that. When we started Fatbag, it was an overlap of what we were passionate about, because of course it served women. Vinita was very passionate about it, and the only thing I carried forward from my earlier selling insurance online experience was that insurance is all about, can you bypass the middleman, right? So it was like, okay, can I use, that time apps weren't big, but can we use internet to directly sell to customers? And at that time, I do admit it was slightly opportunistic as well, because we saw a lot of like buying behavior led business models which would start in the West and eventually end up in India. Like, to give you an example, like auctions, there was eBay. When they came to India, they bought Bazi was doing auctions that time. There was Groupon. When they came in, they bought Crazy, they were doing group buying. So we looked at all the PR and press around Glossybox, Birchbox, and we said, this is it, it's going to come to India and it's going to blow up and become big, and we should have the pole position whenever this thing gets very popular. And that started, I mean, we of course got investors on board finally, and that started a 3-year long journey, where today when I look back, I realized something very interesting. Whoever we spoke to, everybody had just one question: how are you going to manage to keep getting free products to put in your bag, to put in your box, to put in your bag? How brands in India where nobody gives you stuff for free, right? So how are you going to do that? And we kept focusing on the supply part, and we almost took it like they think we can't crack supply. We will crack supply. It was so naive, and we did crack supply. We started getting products not from India. We got it from the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and all sorts of brands. We would get them in the country, send them in our bags. All of this led to one blind spot, which we now realize. I mean, there's a thing about subscriptions. Subscriptions are useful if you consume what is supposed to be consumed during a certain time frame. For example, I have, say, Super Daily Milk subscription. Now, tomorrow's milk that will be outside my door, if I finish today's milk, it is godsend for me. If I don't finish today's milk, that is a headache for me, that, it's going to get spoiled. And it took us 3 years to realize that India, people don't consume beauty, at least at that time, at that frequency, wherein we could send them month after month back-to-back bags and expect them to continue. So we saw a trend wherein they would be with us for 4.5 months and then churn. And once they churned, they left with a feeling that, okay, you know what, this is wasteful, or I have too many products. Super tough to get them back. So I, of course, without a doubt that if we hadn't put in those 3 years, Fatbag, of course, still continues as a very strategic part of the company. It helps us in product discovery, understanding consumer trends. But those 3 years, if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have gotten so close to our consumer or the industry to actually understand that, okay, sugar could be created. But our hypothesis initially was way off. And some of the investors we pitched to, they actually tried telling us that, look, the market size isn't big and all that. We kept hearing that you can't do it, and we just said that no, we will do it. Yeah, that's I don't know. I'm amazed that we are able to look back and laugh at it now. That time it seemed that people would just say that, like, beta tumse na ho payega, and we'd be like, no, we are going to try and fix this.
So in the 3 years, we actually scaled to about 16,000 monthly subscribers. That was the scale that we actually managed to get to. And after that, we just turned off the marketing completely. And then, we still have about 4,000-5,000, which is like pure organic, like people who still want to, because they are like very, very, early adopters, as well as like really experimental about beauty. So they still continue. But yeah, everybody else has churned. And in the last 7-8 years, Kaushik and I have done probably more than 100 calls with founders in food, apparel, accessories, coffee, doing subscription and, going into it with that whole excitement that, this is differentiated and I want to build a subscription company. And we are unfortunately the really, the bad news.
Party poopers.
Party poopers who are always like, sorry, it's very hard to scale. Just see if you can do something easier, because the challenge was that in India, e-commerce was, of course, like you said, just taking off. And then subscription took a while to explain. So we had so many calls where women would like for half an hour keep asking the same question, like, I don't get to choose what's in my bag. I mean, things like that. And then of course the whole like because there was no monthly recurring credit card billing, we had to like charge them in advance for the entire term. And when you do that, it's only possible if it's like a gym membership or a newspaper where it's like, like 30%, 40% of the total, cost that you would incur by paying monthly. Now that in a business which involves a product being delivered every month is impossible. The economics just don't work. So we would give like, okay, 20% off on an annual subscription. But, it was very hard to get, people would be like, I'll just take monthly. And then it became like this monthly box that people are getting, which wasn't really subscription commerce, and the whole, power of having subscribers,
recurring revenue,
6 months, etc. That was going away. And of course, that's when everybody else also was trying subscription. Like I remember Snapdeal was doing this experiment, and Nykaa tried something, but unfortunately, I would be really looking forward to seeing one subscription success come out of India outside of the whole, like, again, gym membership and
the
services.
payment scene did not help at all. I mean, I think that didn't get solved.
I think that was the biggest problem there, right? The card not present transactions. It's a business I've always been fascinated with, because if you look at international sponsors of podcasts, they typically were subscription companies, right? Companies like the meal sending one, Blue something, or Blue Apron, or like coffees of the month clubs and stuff like that. They've always been typical advertisers and podcasters in podcasting internationally, and I was always very kind of disappointed that we never really saw that take off in India in any meaningful way.
Yeah. And Birchbox had 1 million subscribers.
Birchbox.
For us, it was like, okay, in a population of 1.3 billion, we should be able to get to 1 million. But 16,000 was where it.
But that's still commendable. I mean, at least, so that definitely informed at least your user research for, sort of doubling down on the brand. Now we're at the point where, today it's 2021 now. The world understands direct to consumer brands. The world, or rather, especially India, definitely understands it. This whole during 2020, during the pandemic, I mean, I can speak for myself. I have definitely tried out a whole bunch of new brands, which I would have otherwise not discovered, primarily through social media, I guess, and word of mouth. And it's across categories that I've tried them out. From your subscription days to your, diving deep into sugar and building the unique sugar brand that you are, to now, how has that story been? And could you tell us some insights around it, either of you?
Yeah, I'll start with the anecdote, since you mentioned that anecdotes help. So one of the things that, during our Fab Bag days, we had tried was, we found like this very small brand in Greece, and we'd convinced them to like give us like these really subsidized mini liquid lipsticks, which at that time, we'd introduced to our Fab Bag subscribers, and the women went like really crazy about it, because this sort of, the interesting thing, what was happening is that young millennial women were looking at makeup very differently from their moms, right? So they were stepping out, they were, using public transport, they were, going out in pollution, and they wanted products that, in the morning they apply until end of the day, they don't have to think about it. And they wanted colors that really work for their skin tones, including like the deepest and the warmest. So because this Greek supplier was very small, they were able to like, do everything that we told them to with the product and give us something that we thought would work for these consumers. And the feedback was amazing. So what we did after that was we went to all the large brands in India. Like we went to every single makeup brand in India and said that, listen, this consumer is changing. The best product that you can create is like this ultra long lasting matte liquid lipstick. We will give you the formulation. We will give you the colors, and, just help us with these, because we can do great work together as a part of Fab Bags. And all of them looked at that, and, they went back, they just said that, I think it's too early for India. The consumers are used to finding a gloss, and if they apply something from a liquid bottle on their lips, and instead of a gloss, it becomes matte, there will be dissonance, and it's going to lead to a lot of churn for us, and we don't want to. And for them, like their average customer was probably older, and they always thought of it in a more traditional retail way. And this whole emerging crop of young women who were getting inspired by global trends on social media wasn't relevant for them. And every brand told us that this is not happening, they're not going to do it. So in fact, the idea actually we started thinking about back then, when we thought that there is an opportunity to create products for young millennial women, because they are getting 9 out of 10 of them now are inspired by social media when they discover which brand, and not by celebs, but by other real women. Secondly, they're going to be shopping online, so reviews, etc., will make it easier and more democratized for hero products to win, and not just the ads on television. And then of course they wanted products that were like in on global trends, but in a way that suited their Indian aesthetics. So suited Indian skin tone, Indian weather conditions, Indian pollution, etc. And that's when we started talking about this. And then of course we started discussing with our board that we want to, we have ideas for these products and we want to launch this. And we weren't ready to do RIP to Fab Bag, but we just said that we'll throw in these in the Fab Bags, and they'll do well, this new brand that we'll create. And of course the doubt that everybody had was that to create a brand in India you need at least 50 crores, right? And at that time in 2015 we were having this conversation that without at least 50 crores you can't really build a brand. People are not going to trust you. And how much do you have in your bank account? We're like, oh, 30 lakhs. So and so I think we sort of kept deliberating this for many months, because we just thought that it would make sense to create a brand without having the 50 crore in the bank balance. And but then we were seeing that Fab Bag is not scaling, and then we finally thought that, okay, if nothing else happens, what do we have to lose? We'll just create a few products, add them to Fab Bags, and then just see how play it by the year. And then when we launched, and so actually Sugar was launched as an absolute experiment. And when it actually went in the hands of these consumers, those first, we launched with 2 products and then 4 colors of lip crayon after few more months, it really took off, in the sense that they were calling us and we were going out of stock, and Nykaa wanted to list us. And of course we can talk about the growth journey after that. But those products, we really had a lot of insight come data behind the creation of those products, and they did fantastically well. Kaushik, do you want to add something?
I think the other thing that changed was that creating something always had an entry barrier to it. Like, for example, if in the offline world, to create something, I need to put up investments for if not a store, at least a front desk counter. I need to have enough, a large range, so that people don't come and see the brand and say, oh, this is very sparse. I need a celebrity face. Unknowingly, all those barriers started falling away, because when people shop for, say, matte lipstick, or even say apple cider vinegar, I mean, you occupy 1 square in 16 squares with products. So the customer doesn't get to know that you have just 3 SKUs versus your competitor who has 300 SKUs. You don't start off with that disadvantage. When people talk to you about in social media, real people, real reviews on YouTube and Instagram, people don't miss the fact that Kareena Kapoor is not holding that product and talking about it. So unknowingly, subconsciously, a lot of forces started helping, which today it's been codified and it's a playbook. But at that time, all of those started giving us chance after chance, wherein we could be treated on merit, just for how good or bad the product was, and not through all the other factors which used to color someone's perception of a brand. And to be fair, the question which we were asking was also probably not well honed. When we asked how much does it take to create a brand, people did throw such numbers at us, 40, 50 crores. I guess people were thinking about it from what they had seen, that you're going to put so much on television, so much on print, so much on celebrity. I mean, we, beyond the point, if we hadn't done that, the company would have shut down. So we said, you know what, let's just go with it. And this was late 2015, and all through 2016, it was like this weird, moment where the Fab Bag numbers, because we stopped spending marketing money on that, started dwindling, coming down, correcting. And it is like, while that is coming down, Sugar was slowly scaling, and it just sort of kept things in the equilibrium for a very critical 15-month period till 2017, when we raised our Series A, which sort of unlocked a lot of things for us. But that entire 2016 was it was very touch and go. It was very touch and go for
Wow.
us.
Yeah. It was actually like that. We did like, I think FY 15, we did like about 7.8 crore and it was 95% fab bag. And then FY 16, we did again 7.8 crore, but it was, the big difference was that it was like 80%, like not 80%,
Wow.
but maybe 60-70%
60-40, yeah, 60-40.
Yeah. So, and that, and pivots are very hard because it's like, you're going back to saying that your big engine that's running, you were not putting money into it. So you have to go back to like a team size and expense ratio of like the early days. So, we started doing things like cutting down our warehouse to half, cutting down our office to half, telling teams that, next 18 months, it's going to be no increments, etc. So those conversations around the pivots were hard because like at the end of the day, any investor wasn't able to come in putting in more money because they'd already lost their money in fab bag, lost sort of, they hadn't really been able to see it scale.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's why it was so they weren't ready to yet put in more money, and we had to make everything work from that. And the thing about a brand is that you do need working capital because of the fact that even though the gross margins are very good, you do need to spend on the inventory because at the end of the day, unless the inventory is available at all the warehouses, etc., of Amazon, Nykaa, it's not going to sell. So it was, I think those 2-3 years were like really hard for us as we navigated a pivot while trying to sustain on the basis of the existing business. But it actually worked out much better.
That was also the time we started having a lot of disagreements and self-doubt because, I mean, to be fair, for 3 years, I saw this entire thing as a narrative which came together where Vinita would bring in the product and industry expertise, understanding of our target audience, what to send month on month, and I brought in the tech product piece. Suddenly, we were talking about becoming a beauty brand, and I remember there was this there was one very strained conversation we had wherein I had no idea what was going on, and I told her, what, I come, let's do one thing. Let me go back, take a job. You carry onwards with this because I really didn't know where I would fit in this new pivoted part of the business. I mean, of course, I mean, look at all the other brands in all the FMCGs. They have brand managers who lead the whole brand building efforts, and there's just, I mean, there's so much to do. But at that time, that whole disappointment of something not having scaled completely clouded our minds, visibility into what the future could be. And there were some really tough conversations we had at that time. I'm happy we went forward and kept building, but it was there was a lot of self-doubt, at least on
yeah. So now if you see 2021, 22, how the brands are made, like you said, playbook, it's like, you're using a lot of e-commerce, social media, your performance marketing, and it's really changed. But in 2015, it seemed like you're trying to build another Lakme. So in 2015, it was like, like trying to build another Lakme is stupid, as well as, it's not a tech business. It's not a really like a smart people kind of business. It's not a business that requires engineers, so to say. And, that's what led to all those doubts that, are we like really wavering from the path? But, the market was loudly telling us that this is the right thing to do. But it didn't fit in with our, story of us being engineers trying to build a differentiated company using innovation. You just thought that how much could you innovate in a beauty brand? So I think those were like the real conversations that we had. But yeah, yes, we survived.
So if I could just to kind of step back a little bit, right? When you made the pivot, if you will, right? Were there other things in front of you that you were looking at, like, becoming more of a, like a Nykaa, right? Which is selling products from, since you already had supplier relationships and stuff like that for building your box. Did you look at those kinds of opportunities as well? Or once you kind of frozen on sugar, you're like, no, let's build our own products?
We actually used to at FabBag also retail these products because we had to prove that economics to our brand, saying that, you send samples and this many people buy. So there was a funnel that we were creating for our brands, and that's why we were retailing. And we realized that, like the only thing the consumer cared at that point when she was making that purchase decision was the discount. So she wouldn't care about like the experience, the fact that she got the sample, the fact that, you know, all of that. She would just care at that point of time when she's making the purchase, how much is the discount. And which is when we realized that for us to do that, and Nykaa had just started and was doing a fantastic job using content, and you know, we ourselves wondered that would Nykaa be able to fight an Amazon, because Amazon will always have much bigger discounts, even though they weren't big on beauty at that time. And yeah, so I mean, for us it seemed like this was a much bigger opportunity, and it wasn't like, you know, we didn't look at this decision from the perspective of FabBag is not working, what should we do next. We were looking at it from the perspective of, oh my God, like, you know, what these women really want is better products and brands that can give products that are for millennials. So it was not really like running away from what's not working. Effectively, it turned out to be like that, but it was more like getting drawn to this big, you know, loud consumer insight which was coming, which is creating products for millennials. So,
wow. So, and when you obviously, I mean, I actually have a very random side question about the name genesis also. Like, you both are runners, like sugar should not be something which is in your vocabulary. Is this a question you get asked?
Yeah,
we get asked a lot.
Yeah, you know, Sugar Cosmetics is for having that sugar rush without the calories.
That's a very made up story we tell everybody.
It's a made up story, but you know, we are like, women love makeup because it gets them a high, you know, because it's like the thing they do for themselves, and if you can do that without the calories, why not? That's not why we named it though. This is just
no, this question we get asked, and I keep telling everybody, you know what, please give me time. Someday in 2025 or 2030, I'll write a book. I will talk about it, because it's like very, very random and plus say, but yeah, to everybody else, to be fair, we did narrow down a list of 5 names, and some of those names were really bad. Now that we look at it, we did a poll, and this one name, just everybody, when they heard it or saw it on the poll, one feedback we got was that sounds like I've heard this before. It didn't seem like a new name. There was this inbuilt familiarity with the name, which sort of was very different from the other names that we run through. I mean, there was some other nice name. There was something called Pepper. We had Pepper Cosmetics. I mean, we thought Pepper would be peppy. Feedback came, you know what feedback we got? We said that Pepper, but you know, skincare, will it hurt the skin?
I want to put pepper on my face.
Yes. So we came with a name called, I personally love the name Stoked. I thought, you know, you're stoked about something, stoked. And we got feedback which said that, is your product in stock or out of stock? I'm like, okay, wait.
Wow.
Yeah, which is what we build in a bubble sometimes, right? So it was such an eye opener for us. So we just went with that, and it did catch on.
Nice.
In India, you have to think about a name which people don't mess up. I mean, I think that's a very important lens for India, because you have like small distributors, retailers, everybody, and we do get asked that, "Madam, isme chini hai kya?"
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, we get asked that very often.
Actually, it's such an obvious question when, I mean, one would have asked, but this, you know, since you mentioned distributors, I had a question around this also, right? You guys both, again, while you've done businesses, you all this while you've been sharing, like you've done a lot of diverse businesses focused around tech and scaling, and you know, like all entrepreneurs, they look at the addressable market and how huge it is. You did all your data was pointing to everything, right? How did you actually scale the manufacturing and ops part of that, which you guys, personally, you weren't so hands-on with, right? You were never making stuff. This is making stuff. How did that happen for you guys? How did you sort of grow into it?
Yeah. So for FabBag, actually, we had started a bit of this because a lot of brands weren't really creating samples at that time in India. So we would really tell them that, okay, we will import the containers from China. We will, find an FDA approved filling facility where you can do it, because, at the end of the day, FabBag had a clock. Like every month you had to have 5 products going, right? So there would be like brands ditching at the last minute. There would be customs issues and all kinds of. So FabBag was actually a supply chain nightmare. And the best thing about going through a nightmare like this is that, like the next thing, which is like creating a brand and doing like a easier supply chain, makes it look easier. So we have a team which is, like in India, I think we're probably one of the only brands that manufactures in 9 countries. A lot of our products have like a container made in a Taiwan or a China. The product is made in Italy, it gets filled in Dehradun, and stuff like that. So we have a very complex supply chain, but because this team actually, and most of our product, retail, all these people are people who were with us at FabBag and sort of grown with the company. They've seen that struggle for 7-8 years. They're really the hustlers who figured out a way of doing it all like very efficiently. So we are not scared. Like when we think about a new concept that's come up, which is being made in some small factories in Korea, we'll just go there and try to bring it to the market as soon as possible without thinking about the fact that how will the logistics work out. We always try to figure out later that the supply chain, etc., and then we'll try to optimize the costing by saying that, okay, can we make the container cheaper in some other geography, and can we so we've dealt a lot with FDA of India, US, everywhere, as well as manufacturers in various countries, and that I think helps us stay ahead in terms of being fearless in like trying out trends. And at the end of the day, the best part about having a very strong e-commerce side of business apart from retail is that you can do these experiments, go wrong, and just like remove those products and focus on those hero products. And so many of our hero products, our competitors wouldn't have been able to predict that this could become like something like a contouring product. It's like so niche, but we actually like that. There are 2 products which do like for us a monthly net revenue of about 1.5 crore. So it's like a very, very fast moving product, but we've done that crazy experiment by doing a very complex supply chain, but it worked out, and our competition cannot really easily copy that. And that's the important.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, do you see that as an edge for you, for your brand?
Definitely. So we think about 3 things that this is how we will stay ahead. And like sort of now that we think
the
about
VC moat, the moat pitch.
Yes. Moat. In hindsight, these are the 3 like things which we call moat, apart from of course the brand, that's the most important. But one is product. We definitely have like we're able to spot trends early on and bring them to market very efficiently in terms of not spending too much on R&D, using our manufacturers R&D labs to actually do all that. So that's first. And second is of course content. So in the last 2 years, we've really, we realized beauty is a category where content is so critical, because it's like you trying to mirror the experience in the store, where a girl will sit down and the beauty advisor will tell her, this is how you wear a winged eyeliner, this is how you contour. And that entire thing now has to be brought online. So the whole content of how it looks on different skin tones, including like the warmest and the deepest skin tones, is very critical to aiding the purchase. So which is why we, every month we actually have an engagement of more than 250 million on our social media platforms, and we're obsessed with, creating like very original in-house content rather than using just influencers. So that's second. And third, of course, distribution. Luckily, we started, ahead of all the other D2C brands. So the edge that we've had is that we managed to like eventually sign on all the big distributors, as well as these large format retail stores like Shoppers Stop, Lifestyle, etc., at like margins that were feasible before younger brands started getting into stores. So I think these 3 is what we think helps us stay ahead. But consumers really evolving fast, so we never take anything for granted. We're always like, oh my god, like how do we do better, and just make sure that our products are really like 4.8 5-star rated on Amazon consistently and on Nykaa, etc.
Wow. And none of these I mean, since you mentioned those 2 names, they are also companies which manufacture themselves. Nykaa definitely does their own brand products as well. I'm sure some of them compete. This is where your brand play obviously makes sense, where your brand is out there and more visible and sort of trying to be ahead. What is next? Like, how do you stay ahead in this race? Because like the last year, like coming to what you must have seen, everything exploded with D2C. What was the pros and cons of what happened with you guys specifically?
So the good thing about e-commerce search is that like most search in beauty as a category is shockingly brand led. So, you might think about the fact that, everything is linked to just like searching products or like
not
saying that I'm
category
searching for a red lipstick. But no, it's, the searches are dominated by, say, a sugar lipstick or a MAC lipstick or whatever. So brand does play an important role. And I think the other part of it is, as these e-commerce companies have their own brands, etc. I think the big thing that we've continued to invest heavily in is retail, because retail for us is, of course, during COVID, there was, footfall in stores, etc., went down, but we consider that like a sort of a very high operating leverage part of the business, because once you got the store economics right, then every single consumer, you don't have to pay CAC, you just there, and that shelf space is like really keeps growing for you exponentially. And for us, in India, like obviously new brands are coming in, but like shelf space is some of the hardest to get into things, and we are already available in about 10,000 stores. So I think that's the other thing, because consumers take us more seriously as a brand because of the fact that they see us in retail, online. So they may shop at any place, but our whole we have a thesis on how we want to get discovered online and on social media, and then be available every single place, like have crazy distribution, so that you just like availability doesn't become an issue, which I think for the next 3-4 years might be an issue for some D2C brands, because like 90% of India is still shopping offline, and we think we want to solve for that before it becomes like a much easier to grow offline for other brands. Kaushik, do you want to add something here?
No, I think you covered it. The only thing people ask us, why do retail when you're a D2C brand? So technically D2C in its purest form, even our own stores are D2C. We're not paying a commission, we're paying a rent, and we're directly talking to the consumer. We get inspired by a lot of how brands are built in the US, China, more developed markets. Someday there will be large brands being built only in India. But today, like with 6-7% of all trade being e-commerce, rest being offline. I was just joking with someone and saying that you're asking me to bat for 10 overs and asking me to score more than my competitor who's batting 50 overs. That's not fair, right? So if we are in 2021 and if we have to build a big brand and scale, we have to step out of our comfort zone of AWS bills and Shopify and understand that with distributor who doesn't give a shit about who I am, okay? Who doesn't care who I am, usko samjhana ki please keep my products. It will move. So I think that's also we've learned it the hard way over the last 2 years, and I'm glad we did.
So that was actually what I was about to ask. So you built your own distribution. You're not like partnering with somebody to kind of try and like piggyback on a distribution system that they want.
Nobody would partner with us initially.
Okay.
When we wanted to partner, nobody would partner with us. So we said, okay, let's just try building it ourselves. Vinita, if you want to add something to the...
Yeah, and when we started, we were like, okay, 100 crore is our goal. Like, that's the thing. But now that we crossed that number, now we've become very greedy. We are like, actually, like this millennial consumer is suddenly becoming the most relevant consumer. So why 100? Why not, 500? Why not 1,000? And when we do that, then retail is actually critical. But luckily, we in retail also we're fairly hedged. We do general trade, modern trade, our own stores. So we're able to. We have like like general trade is like a super profitable part of our business where you don't have as much working capital, etc. Modern trade and own stores are of course always like slightly harder to break even, etc. So we try to balance those so that this funding goes into that, because at the end of the day we are very anal about being as close to break even as possible. Like last 6 months, when COVID hit, everything was like crashing for us, and the first thing we did was that, okay, let's bounce to profitability. And, because of the fact that the fundamental unit economics are good and it's only like expansion that costs us money, like last 2 quarters, we've actually been profitable while we're at like 50-60% more than our pre-COVID numbers. And that's only happened because of the fact that, we've always built the business very conservatively in terms of not investing too much capital and trying to, use some profitable channels to plow into the non-profitable ones and so on. And that's really helped us scale without spending a lot. And we've also been hedged because we're probably, a company that was very strong on retail. COVID happened, we suddenly had an app on at that time. We were one of the few brands that had its own app. And suddenly we saw that, 80% of our revenue was coming from online and, most of it from our own app. And where we had been focusing on trying to marry content and commerce and really create like an experience where you can figure out which shade works for you better, etc. And that really helped. So this sort of hedging of different channels is not something that we did by design. But, now we value it because, things go up and down, but it helps us fight that uncertainty a bit better.
Wow. and that's where, I mean, that's where I guess the whole, your tech piece comes in, your, you know, obviously the business background that you both have sort of, you know, informed and influenced your, how you run the business, right? How you run the ops, how you run everything. Where now you are a brand, right? Now you are Sugar. You guys are squarely in the hot segment of e-commerce, fashion. Where does this expand? Do you see a lot of the things you both mentioned are, you're doing things by not just your new playbook of D2C, but you're also competing in the home turf of the original large brands of India. So like competing for shelf space with them. So does the fight get tougher given that you're so like you're fighting on both heads, or how are you planning to scale? I mean, this is my open-ended question of what you want to do better in 2021 and beyond.
No, I think it's open-ended, but you know, these are the questions we ask ourselves. So I completely resonate with that. And especially if you've been at a place wherein you've thought that nothing would work and everything would be raised down to naught, when you get some wind in your sails, you suddenly feel like, okay, I have like my basic threshold I've crossed. Now let's try be more fearless. Let's try competing, as you know, pushing this as far as it can go. Now along the way, the D2C narrative got added. Suddenly a lot of funds got interested in the space, that okay, it is possible to build brands frugally, you know, and not going just, you know, batshit crazy, you know, with ATL and television commercials. So the road ahead of us is, I mean, when we say, okay, when I tell the team, okay, you know, 3 years, let's target 500 crores revenue, there is some apprehension, but that is because we are living in a bubble of the internet brands and everything, because very few brands have really gone past that. The correct thing which we've learned to now is step back and say, forget internet, forget D2C, everything. You know, our category, the largest competitor today, is 12 times us. 12. Are you telling me 3 saal mein we won't be able to get to 5 times of, you know, half of what they are today? Then when we put things in perspective, then you're like, yeah, it's a vibrant market. There are a lot of people who are shopping for our products, and we just need to, you know, focus on that and not get distracted by how big the jump is. And fortunately, we have a lot of inspiration in this space also. When we look at Nykaa and the way they've literally doubled their revenues magically every year after year, we are like, there are a lot of people buying in this, you know, and trusting new brands in this space. So I think, you know, that's what keeps us going, that there is a lot of headroom. Yes, as a brand, the thing which you think about is, okay, there's a certain communication which we kept towards tier 1 metro audience, but everybody knows that as the brand proliferates, our general trade stores, distributors move into tier 2, tier 3, and there's a lot of pull even from there. We have to be agile to sort of change our communication to fit in to those markets as well, which we don't have any science or history of. So again, we'll probably make some mistakes and figure it out, but the efforts are on. I think the only thing we have learned is keep throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. Earlier, we didn't have a lot of team members or funds to try out multiple experiments. So actually, if you ask me honestly, the only goal right now is over the next 12 months to maximize the number of experiments we can do. Because if you're able to do that, we know that something will stick. So that's the blind faith we are going with.
And in terms of categories, like makeup is like about 20% of the beauty market in India. There are like 2-3 very large categories that, you know, we will also expand to, because it's like the logical next step, because we have the distribution, the back end built in. And, you know, we think that the first principles of how to build a brand for millennials stay the same. So yeah, so then, you know, that's the other avenue that we're exploring for future growth, apart from just like trying to be in the top 3 brands in makeup. That's goal number 1. And then, of course, you know, explore the other 2 categories and see what we can build in terms of a sizable business there.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and that's the perfect kind of ambition to have. Why not? Given that the stories you just shared with us, I think you guys can do anything. What can't you do, given that you've overcome?
Why not is a very important thing that our team keeps saying. Like, why not? 3x next year, why not?
Yeah. Why not indeed? Wow. I mean, thank you so much, guys. This was a fascinating discussion to getting to know, you know, both of you and the amazing brand that you've built. I mean, please do share where folks who are listening to this can reach out to you. Are you guys on Twitter? Do you prefer LinkedIn? Where shout out to whether if you're hiring people or what you're looking for, anything.
Yeah, so I think both of us over the last at least lockdown time, we've missed company of and random office banter so much that suddenly we started spending a bit more time on Twitter, a little bit more time on LinkedIn. So, but yeah, so I'm on first name Kaushik MKJ on both LinkedIn and Twitter. Instagram, I'm not very active. I know very few guys who have killed it on Instagram, by the way. But but yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out if there are any follow-up questions. We are recruiting and building the team. A lot of it is for our new initiatives, which are across products and channels. So if you think you'd like to build with us, please reach out to hr@velvet.com or Kaushik@velvet.com. Both work. But the spelling of velvet is a little different. So, okay.
I think we'll put that in the footnotes.
Yes.
We'll have that in here, yes.
Thanks for confusing everybody, Kaushik. I'm available on @Runophilia, which is also slightly confusing, but it's RUNOPHILIA, the love for running, on Twitter. So yes, happy to connect with anybody.
Yeah, and I think you guys both are active on Twitter, which is great. So we will hope that some folks who are listening to this definitely do reach out. And once again, thank you so much for doing this. This was a great conversation. Amit, you want to?
Just before we end, everybody please subscribe or follow or whatever it is on whatever podcasting app that you're listening to. Listen on the IVM podcast app as well. That could also work. Also, over the last couple of months, we moved this to not being just audio. It's also available on YouTube on the IVM podcast app. So please follow us, subscribe to us, listen to us wherever you want to, but do listen.
Yes.
And reviews, please. Sorry, reviews help. So please do some reviews.
I'm sure you guys are used to doing this for your own content if you've been doing it yourselves. Like, share, subscribe, the whole
Like, share, subscribe.
Yeah, our team refuses to put us as the face, but yeah.
This is
good.
Like, nobody's gonna buy your product.
But this was your chance. I hope this was entertaining as it might.
We thoroughly enjoyed it, Shila, Amit. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here, guys.
Thanks, Rishi. Thanks, Vinya. Thanks, Utsav. See you. Bye.